And welcome back. Today we're going to use our if statements to help us do something called lexicographic and alphabetical ordering, which is a great way when we're looking at how comparing strings can help us determine which one comes first, because there is a big difference. So let's start first with lexicographic ordering. This is an ordering that's very similar to our concept of alphabetical ordering, except it follows what's known as the ASCII table of ordering. ASCII, of course, is simply the order in which those individual characters are laid out for a language to interpret. Now, we use the string method compare to test the lexicographic ordering of two strings, and it's pretty simple. We just do string1 dot compare to, and we put in parentheses string2. This is, of course, going to return a negative number if string1 comes before string2 in lexicographic ordering. And so the way to test that is we just say it's less than 0. So if it's less than 0, well, that means it's preceding it. It's coming before it. Now, if we look at this as some example code here, if we saw it before, well, it's less than 0, it's preceding it. How do we do for the rest of this? Well, here's an example code to help us look at that. If I have string1 compared to string s2 is greater than 0, well, it follows if before we said it precedes it, well, this is going to follow. It's going to come after it in lexicographic ordering. And then, of course, what's if it's the exact same string? What's if you were comparing, for example, the word pizza, and you were comparing it against the word pizza, and they're both, let's say, all lowercase? Well, those two strings could be equal, and technically it wouldn't meet the first condition because it's not going to come back less than 0, and it's not going to come back greater than 0 because, again, they're equal, so that's why we have the else. So anytime we're doing one of these comparisons, for example, in lexicographic, or we're doing in alphabetical, which we'll look at here in a second, you're always going to have this else statement here, because that else statement is going to act as the equals test. Now, with the compare to method itself, the thing we have to understand is that all uppercase letters are going to come before all lowercase letters. So, for example, if you're looking to see if a capital A is coming before a lowercase a, then you'll know that the capitals come first, followed by the lowercase, which means if we go A, B, C, D all the way down to Z, those are all going to be capitals first, and then we'll go to the lowercase a, b, c, d, all the way down to lowercase z. Therefore, lexicographic is very different from what we would consider alphabetical, because alphabetically, a capital A should be the same as a lowercase a. All right. In ASCII table sets, the individual upper and lowercase letters are alphabetized, and so because they're alphabetized by uppercase and then by lowercase, it makes it stand out differently. If we want true alphabetical ordering, therefore, we have to use compare to ignore case to sort alphabetically, because then it's going to treat a uppercase letter exactly the same as a lowercase letter. And so if we look at this in an example, you'll see it's exactly the same thing as what we just saw with our lexicographic ordering, except here the big difference is that we now have compare to ignore case. It's exactly the same otherwise as the code we just saw. Then we have the word alphabetical here instead of lexicographic. But the code otherwise is exactly the same. We have an if statement here, s1 dot compared to ignore case, s2 less than 0. It's a negative, so it's going to proceed. This one says if it's not negative, we're going to follow, and otherwise it's going to be equal. And so we're going to go ahead and look at this here in Eclipse, and I went ahead and quickly fired some quick code. And so I have two strings here that I can compare. And I went ahead and put in the lexicographic ordering. So I have if string1 dot compare to string2 less than 0. We know it precedes. Otherwise, if it is greater than 0, we know it follows. And the only other condition we'd have to handle is if they're equal. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and actually just copy this code here. And let's go ahead and do our alphabetical, because remember, they're exactly the same. The only difference is this is going to change to compares to ignore case. And that's the only difference between these two. So I'm just going to go ahead and change that to compare to ignore case. And then I want to change lexicographic to alphabetical. All right, and let's go ahead and run our program just to see what we get. And you'll see in lexicographic ordering, string 1 follows string 2 in lexicographic ordering, and in alphabetical, they're considered equal. And if we look, it's very easy to see why. String 1, you see it says hello world, but in here we have uppercase followed by a bunch of lowercase letters, a space, an uppercase followed by lowercase. If you look at string 2, these are all uppercase. And if you remember what we said, it follows the ASCII character set. And if we look at the ASCII table here, one of the things you'll notice is that we don't necessarily start right away with a number type here. So if we scroll down, we got to go a little bit further into our ASCII table here. And once we get here into starting right around character 33, we can start recognizing ASCII characters that might be familiar to us, that are characters on our keyboard. Then we have numeric values in here. We have some symbols. And then right here at number 65, you'll see we have the letter A. And you notice that we can proceed all the way down here to letter Z. This is, of course, all uppercase letters. And then, of course, we got some more symbols in here. And then at 97, we have lowercase a. So anytime we're talking about lexicographic, this is what we're referring to, is this table here that is behind the scenes operating for many different languages and computers and programming. But you don't have to know what the ASCII table, each individual one of these values are. You can always look up the ASCII table. The more important thing is knowing that when we want to compare things with lexicographic, we're going to have to keep this ordering here in mind. Whereas if we want a true alphabetical, we're going to need to use the equals, or not the equals, the compare to ignore case. Because otherwise, if these are, even though we might say, hey, I got a Q here and I have a Q here, if we don't use the ignore case, it's going to treat it differently because, again, if you look here, the uppercase letters come first.